Hi, good morning, everyone. Rather good afternoon, and hope all of you are well. We're going to, as discussed, earlier with you, we're going to start the second unit in our Level 3 Diploma in Digital and Information Technologies. And we're going to be starting off with a very, very interesting unit, which is Introduction to Emerging Technologies. This particular unit basically, has lots of things that we'll be able to relate to because we experience technology, we work with technology, and kind of, it has now become a part and parcel of our lives. So it will not be wrong for me to say that today we have, two lives that we live. So you have your personal life in real time, and then you also have, your digital side of things, which primarily, are things that we do, online, or as we say, we have a digital avatar. So lots of these things, that we basically see, discuss, and talk about, are going to be covered in this particular unit. So in this context, what I would suggest is that if you go back a couple of years, just to lay a bit of a foundation in terms of what we're going to be discussing. Thanks for joining, Solomon, and thanks for joining, Colin. I know you have joined, so that's great. But just to give you a bit of a context in terms of this particular unit, when we talk about introduction to emerging technologies, I think we all remember the film by Steven Spielberg. When he did the Avatar. In way back in, I think, a couple of years back. I can't remember the exact date, but I think somewhere in 2008, 2009, 10, or maybe somewhere in the regions of 2010, 2012. And that film basically epitomizes, the whole aspect of how, things can work out, in the digital technology field. So in this case, when we, look at how technology has emerged in the last 2 decades, we see a lot of development which has happened. With the coming in of the internet obviously was introduced by Tim Berners-Lee in 1995. Before that, it was used as, network by the US military, which was called the ARPANET and DARPANET. But the commercial advent of the internet by Sir Tim Berners-Lee in 1995, and slowly and gradually transformed digital landscape. So as it became more accessible, more users were able to get access to it. And then we had the dot-com boom in the early 2000s, a lot of companies which emerged out of it after the dot-com bust in 2001-2. We see Facebook, likes of LinkedIn, and social networking sites emerging. And that is where the landscape of, when we talk about emerging technologies started to shape up. But we will look at this in a bit more detail. So just putting a bit of a context here, that when we talk about emerging technologies, there are lots of them. And I think in our discussion, when we watch the news, discuss with friends and colleagues, you would normally discuss things about, 3D printing. You talk about drones today. We talk about, for example, social media. We talk about, advancements which are coming across because of artificial intelligence, robotics. So all that is within the remit and the field of, when we say emerging technologies. And the reason of why we study emerging technologies, as a unit in this particular course is because it's all related to IT. And to a certain aspect, IT, transforms into telecom. And these then two technologies put together actually are enhancing efficiency, productivity, bringing across gains in terms of, efficiency across businesses, organizations. And that's why this is quite important. So when we look at the theme, which this unit will ask us to look into, it'll basically ask us to look at developing a bit of knowledge and know-how about how these technologies are going to be useful for businesses, workplace, in personal and professional aspect of it. And then the idea would be to try and, go into some of these in a bit more detail to understand, not just superficially look at some of the terms. What is social media? What is digital technology? What is, for example, looking at things like project management, collaboration tools, video conferencing. We'll go into a bit more depth in terms of understanding these from an IT perspective. When you use them within the organization from a point of view of, increasing communication, managing communication, bettering or improvements in communication, efficiency, productivity. So we look at all those differences and key aspects of what it brings to organization, businesses, and individuals. Now, from a point of view of unit, the credit value is 5. It's purely a theoretical unit, and I think what we are going to be looking into is getting into details of things that we have been hearing about, but look at them in a bit more depth. When we talk about, say, artificial intelligence, how is it, touching our lives? Simple things when you obviously look at, today in the offices, you have EPBX systems, you look at on websites, you have chatbots, and all based on some form or shape in, on the engine of what is called artificial intelligence. So those bits is something that we'll get into in a bit more detail. There are, in terms of the overview, about 5 learning outcomes in this unit. Today we are looking at starting the first one, wherein we are going to try and understand the current and future emerging trends when we talk about the digital landscape. And then there are 4 assessment criteria, 2 of them pass, 1 merit and 1 distinction. So what we're going to learn in the pass criteria is going to be looked at expanding into analysis and explaining the benefits and advantages or disadvantages in the merit section, and then a bit of analysis in terms of how these are useful for businesses would be the distinction task. So I'll now switch over to the PowerPoint slide that we've got, and we're going to go through some of these slides today in a bit more detail during our first session. And the idea would be to discuss, how what is the digital landscape today? What do we understand from it, the current and the future emerging trends? And we look at a bird's eye view in terms of how these things which are obviously shaping, our personal and professional lives on a day-to-day basis. Now, just a key bits that we want to look at first. So when I talk about, for example, emerging technologies, what do I mean by, emerging technology? So when you look and hear about things like, today there is a term which is becoming quite synonymous with what we do in terms of our discussion, and that is called the Internet of Things. So what does that mean in terms of Internet of Things? What is the meaning of that? So when we look at, in simple terms, when we use the term IoT, Internet of Things, that essentially means that it is a system of interconnected, devices. It could be devices, it could be different forms of devices, which are basically connected to form a network. And that digital network, which allows us to get information, share information, transmit information, absorb or consume information, essentially, would be termed as what are called Internet of Things. And when we talk about connected appliances, when we talk about, smart home security systems, we talk about smart home meters today, we talk about wearable, technology like the VR virtual reality. We talk about, when I say wearable technology, you have the Apple iWatch, you have the Galaxy Watch, iGalaxy Watch, or whatever that is called, which is used primarily as a wearable gadget, and that keeps tab of your, blood pressure, for example, and some of the gadgets that we use, which basically collect information, but then transmit it over the internet to provide data, which then can be analyzed by relevant experts in the field, would be essentially all related to what are called the Internet of Things. So when we talk about Internet of Things, they are basically going to be a network of objects which are connected to each other, and they transmit information through the use of sensors, software, and other technologies which are related primarily to wearable side of things, and that would help in connecting and exchanging information. Now, when we talk about technology, just as a word, what does technology mean? So when we talk about the term technology, when you look at the textbook's definition, it is going to be basically related to something which allows you to apply your scientific knowledge for practical purposes and to get some benefit or usage out of it. And that is what is technology. So when we talk about emerging technologies, if you look at the 40s era, just after the World War I, II, when we talk about breakthrough in technologies or modernization which was happening, industrialization which was happening, you generally see, cars started to be mass manufactured. You had a lot of other home appliances like the microwaves, washing machines in the 60s and 70s, which started to become, household objects. when you talk about some of these, they were technologies or trends that we saw. Some part of automation was, being brought into through appliances that we use at home, and that meant basically a technology. That means you're using your scientific knowledge to create something as an object, and that helps you increase or do work, or say, for example, productivity. A simple example that I would give here is you look at farming, which has been an age-old activity. Now, how has farming transformed over the years? So you look at the Industrial Revolution, the coming in of tractors, some of the turbines, machines, which could be used as farming equipment, allowed manual work or manual labor to be, we were because of using the technology or instrument or machines, as we call it, allowed us to do away with manual labor. So that is technology. So when we look at emerging technologies, we look at decades through which how technologies have emerged and how they have helped us, better lives and obviously, increase efficiency, productivity across the board in any sector that we talk about. Now, some of the, because it's a vast field, so what I've done is I've looked at this CompTIA, Emerging Technology Summit, which normally happens every year, and they kind of come out with a prediction in terms of what 10 key technologies, which you're going to see, which are going to take hold in the next few decades. So this year, when this report was published, a screenshot that talks about things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 5G. We all use mobile phones. So we have seen how when mobiles were built, bulky, big, like bricks, and then how the size is transformed. Today we are able to use emails, take photographs, location-based services, sat navigation. All those things have got integrated because as the technology has bettered and the networks have become better, the efficiency in terms of speed has increased from edge, as we had it, LTE to 2G, 3G, 2.5, 3G. You look at 4G, and now you have 5G, which allows even video streaming at 1 gigabit, per second on mobile phones, which are smarts that you have in your hand. So they give us a bit of a snapshot in the report that you look at serverless computing, blockchain, robotics, biometrics, 3D printing, virtual reality, augmented reality, VR, AR, and then drones, which could be used for irrigation, for agriculture, for various. Let's say Amazon is using drones currently, or trying to look at currently doing pilot in the US to use drones, and in the UK in certain areas to look at deliveries. So these are all technologies which are going to be impacting our lives in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And this is a snapshot of why this unit is quite important, is because we see technology impacting our day-to-day lives, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, or it's at a social place. We see that thread, which is coming, or is basically going all across the board in whatever we do in terms of whatever interactions we do, with colleagues, friends, peers, things like that. So, from a point of view of the unit itself, I think it was important for me to just put a bit of an emphasis on understanding the core, term, which is emerging technologies, which is the name of the unit itself, an introduction to emerging technologies, so that we have a very good understanding. Now, what you see in this particular top 10 emerging technologies is what is going to be drilled down in a bit more detail in some of the learning outcomes that we'll cover. So we'll be looking at artificial intelligence, we'll be looking at social media, we'll be talking about how emerging technologies are impacting some of the industries like healthcare, for example. We'll take up examples of COVID-19 pandemic. We look at telecoms as an example, education, for example. These are all different industries, and we will be basically relating to, each of this technology that we see here, in the learning outcomes that we are going to look at going forward with. Now, what I also want to do is obviously get into, as we discuss, into some of the assessment criteria after giving you a bit of a background. And we will look at touching the first one today, which basically talks about explain the benefits of using digital tools. Now, one of the things, again, in terms of, when we look at the broad definition, when we talk about, what digital. So we understand the meaning of the word, what does the meaning of the word digital mean? Digital basically means you're looking at transmitting signals, zeros and ones, anything which goes over the internet, typically a data which is, converted into some alphanumeric strings, and then it is transmitted or communicated over the internet would be essentially something which is digital. So when we talk about digital, one of the things that we have seen in our lifetime as children and in, childhood is primarily looking at, understanding that we have spoken about things like when we had a wall clock, or a wristwatch. Let me give you an example of a wristwatch. So all of us have had wristwatches, but in the 80s and 90s, we had Casio bringing across what is called the digital watches. So what we saw was we were all used to the calendar, which is the time calendar, the Roman numerals or numbers on a wristwatch or on a wall clock. But suddenly, with the changes in technology and advancement which Casio was able to bring, they started to bring across what is called the digital watch, and in those cases, the watch was able to do chronograph and keep time and set timers and alarms and things like that. So that was a simple example of how things became from analog to digital. So when we talk about digital tools, we are talking about here in terms of tools which are going to be important in terms of companies and organizations and businesses and their processes. So when we talk about these tools, we are going to be looking at how some of these advancements in technology from analog to digital has allowed essentially, the benefits of, say, for example, efficiency to come in, time, reducing time in terms of doing certain things which has come in. And those are going to be things which has broadened the, the use of, when I say the dissemination of information. So if you look at in the 80s, most of the material that we used to get was printed, postcards, letters through the post. We used to have mail drops and things like that. But now if you look at all that has got transformed into what is called emails, newsletters, websites. And this is again a bit of a transformation that we have seen. So what are digital tools? If you have to ask this question, in terms of what are digital tools? So basically digital tools are going to be tools that businesses use for various reasons. We are using it, for example, for education, delivering education. And what digital tools are we using? We're using a PowerPoint. We're using the internet. We're using Join Me, for example, as a video conferencing software. And these are tools which are allowing us to deliver education. You're sitting in the comforts of your own home, and we are teaching from the center of the college. And this allows us to basically share our screen using the PC and the software, which is Join Me. Using the internet, we are able to, broadcast this over to thousands of kilometers or, miles to learners across the globe. And this is basically use of digital tools like PC, Join Me software, video conferencing, internet. And this allows us to basically make or deliver programs efficiently to learners worldwide. So when we talk about digital tools, these are tools which are going to be programs, resources which could be accessible online, like you use the learner management system. And for example, when you browse the internet, what is the digital tool in that? The digital tool in that is the browser, whether you use the Chrome browser, the Firefox, the Internet Explorer, the Edge, whatever it is. But Safari, you're using one of the online software, which is a browser software, to be able to get onto the internet and then browse the website. And these are what are called digital tools. So essentially, when we talk about examples of tools, you use a software to, say, make a small video. You use FaceTime on your phone using a software, and that is a tool which allows you to, make use of, maybe broadcasting or having a chat, face-to-face chat with your friend. You use a chat, like WhatsApp. That's a tool. We use Microsoft Office. I'm using Microsoft PowerPoint presentation, and that is a tool without which I cannot make presentation slides. And because it aids in me allowing to present this data, this is why it is a digital tool. Now, what are the benefits of using these? Now, we were obviously, if I go back to my schooling days, when I did my schooling, obviously a lot of it was pretty much in the classrooms. There was nothing online teaching. The whiteboard or the blackboard with the chalk essentially, and lecturers used to teach, or teachers used to teach, in the classroom, we used to make notes on our notepads or copies and essentially, revise them and then sit paper-based exams. How has that transformed? If you look at 25, 30 years from the past and look at now in the future, they have become, you still go to the classroom, yes, but in the classroom you have a TV or a sharp whiteboard or a blackboard, which basically allows teachers to write. It has a connectivity in the classroom wherein basically learners can or students can actually get what the teacher is writing onto their laptops or PCs because it's wirelessly broadcasting. And if you look at some of the Promethean, I don't know whether if you've heard about the company called Promethean, and if you look at Promethean as a company which is based in Blackburn, and if you look at their active boards, which are used now to primarily teach in the classroom, they have a projector. These are smart boards. You can use stylus, pen, make notes, you can print out. All those things can actually just happen, and that has transformed the normal classrooms now into what are called interactive classrooms. And this is basically a digital tool which now kind of helps the teachers to be able to teach more effectively in the class, because it can broadcast to laptops. It can, note down, say, for example, most of the bits which you are scribbling onto the screen. And then at the same time, it can store that information and then email it to the learners using a software. So when we talk about some of these things which we do get to see, in terms of tools, they are what are called digital tools. And these tools have then allowed the classrooms to become more interactive. And these touch panel screens have, just as an example, have been used in the education field now to promote e-learning or digital learning. Now, the task says, if we have understood what are digital tools as a very generic term can be applied across various sectors. So digital tools in the case of healthcare would be when you look at MRI machines, you look at X-ray machines. Those are tools which are allowing you to get actually the output which is required. Sometimes you would see GP surgeries, doctors are using PCs, or they are using label printers and things like that or a printer that you use to print out a prescription. These are all tools. So this is a very generic area. So you have to pick out one particular sector and then talk about what are the benefits of digital tools. I could pick out manufacturing. I could pick out engineering. I could pick out, say, for example, education, healthcare, banking, for example. Today, one of the digital tools that you have for banking is a mobile phone app on your phone. You can, ATM is a digital tool which allows you to withdraw money. These are all tools that you are getting to see. And what we need to be able to do is discuss some of these tools from a point of view of how they are helping us or are advantageous to us in terms of doing our day-to-day activities. Now, there's a very interesting article that you can read, which is primarily on, Harvard Business Review. And this particular article basically talks about, the digital transformation which has happened, which is primarily not just technology, but it is now becoming a way of life. And, if you don't know technology, if you don't embrace technology, you get left out. So it's a very good article for you to read in your own time. And that will give you some more insight into how you would see, if I just share the screen with you, how you would see, digital tools becoming a part and parcel of our lives. So that's the article. It's not about, it's a very particular article because when COVID hit, a lot of companies were grappling with employing tools which allow their workers to actually work from home. So remote IT, remote working as concepts that we've read and heard about were actually becoming a reality with most organizations, not just the big ones which can invest because they have the money for infrastructure and technology, but even the small organizations. That is where the role of IT or IT managers or IT administrators in the company became quite important, is because they were then called on to look at this particular enablement which was required to be done for workers to be able to work from home during lockdown. And that article, and some of the benefits of how digital tools are transforming our lives are basically discussed here. Switch you back onto the slide. Now, briefly, after reading a couple of articles, and journals and latest reports, what I've done is I've just summarized some of the advantages or benefits of using digital tools. Now, obviously, we look at technology today to be able to use it for, ease to access. Basically, it allows access to information easily because you're able to go onto the website, you can browse a brochure, you can look at the newsletter, you can open things up on your phone, on your tablet, on PC, Mac, whatever it is. So access to information is widely available because of the use of technology. A lot of companies today publish data on their website, even annual journal reports, things like that are published, and that allows ease of access to the information. Obviously, technology is helping us save time. Sometimes in the past, if you recall, you were sending out letters to your clients, to your customers, or whatever it is, and that used to be done through the post. Today, that is replaced by a simple email in some cases. And wherever you need to create record or have documentation, you do send letters across in the post. It's not totally gone away, but generally you would see 70, 80, 90% of all communication which companies do today, is through email, and that saves time. Ease of mobility, some things which are put across as bullet points are self-explanatory, because when you look at better communication, you can pick up the phone and speak. If you look at 50 years back, phone infrastructure, telephone lines, not everybody had a phone, and in those cases, the means of communication was predominantly through the post. And now, because of the coming in of phones, availability of FaceTime, WhatsApp, and chatting softwares and things like that, or applications, you have better forms of communication available. It's efficient. No longer international standard dialing is expensive to some countries, because of the infrastructure. Some of the calls actually going over the VoIP. This has brought across cost efficiencies to companies which have employees, branch offices in different countries. So communication has become not just effective, but also cost efficient. And obviously, when we talk about things like banking, if you ask me honestly, just a case in point, I've never been to my bank to where I opened the branch, I think about 25 years ago with Barclays. I've never been to the bank. Most of the banking is predominantly online. I did go in to deposit some money sometimes. I think the last when I went to the bank was maybe 6, 7, 8 years back. And everything, you can scan your checks, you can deposit your checks today with, different places, and use the application, video calling, telephone calling, and do your banking activity, do it online. And all that is because of the availability of, internet banking or online banking. And obviously, technology in terms, when I talk about the education sector, it has helped improve, education, wherein e-learning has now been introduced. There are lots of technologies, as I mentioned to you earlier, which allow, effectively, a lot of bits to happen in the classroom in terms of interactivity. And I was giving you an example of Promethean, which is a leader in, interactive boards. Predominantly all schools, colleges, universities, employ that, at least in UK, Europe, and, in the US. It's a company which is listed on our stock exchange. It's a very big company, and obviously they have a lot of educational products, different types, which basically are aiding in education and delivery of information, specifically in offices and in places where information has to be delivered through various mediums. Now, I have taken a simple example of looking at benefits of digital learning, because you have to pick up a sector. It's a very broad task. So I've looked at e-learning in particular. That is something which you can relate to, because you're learning and doing this course with us through online or e-learning. And essentially, there's a handout that I put which basically talks about the benefits of e-learning. And it's a very good handout, because that allows you to essentially look at going through a report which CIPD has produced, and that report essentially, I have put up on Moodle for you, and that should be something which is a good read to, finish, this task or attempt this task when it comes to the assignment. So that report is here. It talks about the digital learning fact sheet, which is predominantly related to, the task 1 that we're talking about, benefits of digital learning, and that would be a good read. It's a couple of pages, but that's a very good read, because I've looked at especially at one sector, because benefits of digital tools is quite broad. So I picked up education, and in education I picked up e-learning, and this is a very good read which will allow you to understand the benefits of how technology is helping in delivery of education nowadays when people choose to do learning online. Now, In terms of switching you back now to the second interesting, criteria, which is again going to be talking about, we need to describe and discuss the evolution of social media, collaborative tools, project management, digital technology. So this is a very, very wide and an open area, but what I've tried to do in a couple of slides is explain how this evolution has happened. Because what we need to do is describe. So you could describe it in words, and I could write maybe, put together maybe 15, 20 slides, and that would still not do justice. So what I've done is I've looked at some infographics to basically discuss the evolution of some of the key points which have been asked in assessment criteria 1.2. So when we talk about the evolution of social media, you think of social media, and the humble beginnings of how social media actually started. If you go back and see when we started to see bulletin boards, or boards, essentially notice board, bulletin boards, which started to appear, and they were slightly controlled by remotely sending in messages. So sometimes when you go on to the motorway, you see some motorway roadworks happening, you would normally see some sort of notice boards or bulletin boards which would say slow down, speed restricted to 40, or motorway, highway maintenance happening, things like that. Those are small examples of how you would see boards or bulletin boards which were used to broadcast information to the members of public, started to come across in the 1970s, so 78 onwards. Slowly and gradually that expanded on to, with the internet coming in 1995, and that meant that, Google was registered, google.com, and when we see that happening, we see a lot of different brands that have become synonymous with social media. So when we talk about blogging, vlogging, we talk about social networking, we talk about sites which basically allow us to do interaction, publish information, emails that we talk about, like Hotmail was created by Sabir Bhatia, who was the founder of Hotmail. Later on, he sold that to Microsoft, for $400 million. So one of the most successful ventures in the early days, when he came up with the internet emailing solution, rather than having emails through servers or PCs at home, wherein you required an internet service provider, he created something which was primarily on the cloud. And, when we talk about Hotmail, that was one of the initial bits which came across, when we started to see emails, client, and things like that, like Yahoo, AOL, becoming online. So when we see the evolution of social media basically encompasses a lot of different brands. So you talk about Instagrams, Twitter, Snapchat, you look at Google+, which has obviously been discontinued by Google. You look at Tumblr, Facebook, YouTube. We talk about, some of the apps like WeTransfer, other apps like video apps, which are Vimeo. There are loads of them that we talk about. And Flickr, for example, these were all started off as sites which allowed us to essentially share information publicly on a chat board, on a notice board, or on a news feed online. And as you will see, as the internet connectivity has improved, the speed has improved, so has the number of companies which are coming into this foray increased. So you look at from 1995, when Google, when the internet was made commercially available to the members of public, Google.com or Google came into existence in 1997. And from then on, you see a number of companies which started to come up, and they have now somehow become a part and parcel of our lives. So social networking service, as we call it, SNS, has today over 256 brands, which basically, in one way or the other, allow us to interact with people, members who are connected to us, friends, colleagues, peers, and obviously allow us to interact online. And that particular phenomena that we only get to see today in terms of let's say exchanging information, exchanging media, doing collaboration, sharing of content, enhanced communication through the internet or via, say, in the organizations is via internet, is all nothing but we need to remember that it's all because of social media. So when we talk about social media, when we talk about social networking, interactive media, we are basically talking about the Web 2.0 or the internet. When we talk about 1995 to 2005, we talk about Web 1.0 because the internet was still evolving, the speeds were coming up, companies were creating websites, new types of services were being launched. Then we talk about Web 2.0, which is basically second generation internet, and the speeds became faster. So we went away from dial-up modems in some countries, and it became continuous connectivity. So it didn't need to longer dial-up, or for example, internet-based technologies, communities, interaction and collaboration started to appear, and that was called the Internet 2.0. And that we see from say 2005 to 2015. Then we see Internet 3.0, wherein you had e-commerce, m-commerce, kind of commerce-related transactions, because payment gateways became possible and banking became possible. So after 2010, we see the emergence of what is called the Web 3.0, wherein you generally see that with the coming in of integration of transaction or banking or payment systems into websites, essentially led to a whole set of new commerce and industry arising, and that is where we get to see eBays, the Amazons, becoming big, and that was Web 3.0. Today we are in the phase wherein we see Web 4.0, because of the connectivity increasing, the number of people getting access to the internet worldwide increasing. I think the last statistics which I looked at was, if I do a quick Googling up, how many users have access to the internet globally. If I just do a quick, I think my understanding was, last I looked at, was probably 3 billion users. Now it's 4.66 billion. So if I just switch you over to what I've just done, a quick Google search. So how many people have access to the internet today out of the total, human population of 7.9 billion globally? 4.66 billion people have access to the internet. So that is a coverage of 59.5% of the global population having the access to the internet now. So we are in a phase which is predominantly called, Web 4.0. And when we talk about Web 4.0, we are basically going to be talking about, speeds. We are going to be talking about, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, technology being integrated into things like, you have the Philips Hues, you have the home heating system, home appliances, all talking to the internet. So that is where we get to see, how the Internet of Things, IoT, is the term that we use now, and that is what we are waiting to see currently when we talk about Web 4.0. So when we see the evolution of social media, it has its humble beginnings in the 1978s, and today when we get to see the modern side of social media, we are more aware of Twitter, Flickr, Facebook, Instagram, Bebo, those kind of platforms, Snapchat, which allow us to do sharing of, information, different forms of information, across the internet with our colleagues, with our friends, peers, and, that is what we need to be looking at from a point of view of, evolution of social media. Now, if I go into, say, a bit more detail with regards to the emergence, and if you want to read and get into a bit more detailing, I would suggest if you read this particular blog, which is by which basically talks about the evolution of social media. And this particular blog, if I just quickly open and show it to you, will give you a very pertinent and a good detailed timeline of how social media sites have emerged over the years. And what we want to be able to do is basically create certain tiers in which we have seen these advancements happening, and that will be a good read in addition to what I've discussed with you so far in the session. So what was the pre-internet, say for example, roots of social media, then the launch of social media sites, then the coming in of the internet, modern social media sites that we talk about, popular ones like Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and then we talk about how this has now transformed our experience of speaking to customers. So whether you're in a business where you are dealing B2B or business to customer, how that has helped us transform and provide a fuller experience to some of our customers. And this particular a write-up or an article basically tells you in terms of how this is also being monetized, from an aspect of why more companies are embracing social media and the integration of social media into their business strategies. Now let's very briefly look at the evolution of project management. So when we look at project management, as a field, it came about in the 1950s, but obviously when we go back and see the pre-GIT, pyramids and building of those pyramids, you would see that that has some pillars of essentially being project managed. So thousands of workers, laborers were essentially employed as slaves, or employed essentially to, build those pyramids and there was some sort of an organization which allowed, the whole projects to, be fulfilled. So those are basically, aspects that we see the roots of it. But actual modern day evolution of project management is where we get to see in the 1950s when US Navy first, for the first time considered controlling contractors through, for a project that they were doing. And these contractors were issued contracts, and they were given contracts which was time bound, specific, and they had to deliver on these specific tasks at any in a particular point in time. And that is where we see the evolutions of project management happening. Again, why this is important? Because when we talk about companies today, when we talk about businesses, when we talk about communication between businesses and consumers, this is a very good article for you to go ahead and read, and this will provide you a bit more detail into the evolution of project management, because today this is a technique which is employed by most businesses. You look at Samsung launching a new product, that is project management, because a team is pulled together from different aspects of manufacturing, engineering, marketing, sales, HR, advertising, PR, and they come together as a core team. They form a core team. They do product launch of a new phone or a new watch or a new product, and then the team gets disbanded and they go back to doing their usual job. So when you see project management as a field, what most organizations today are doing is because they are using it to do key operations, in some cases form cross-functional teams, and that allows the delivery or creation of say for example products and services to be delivered to customer on a real-time basis, in a real-time launch. For example, when the product is launched, the phone is available pretty much in 1 or 2 days, in the outlets. So this article will give you a bit of a background in terms of where the roots of project management are, how it started, why it is becoming important. And this is again because this task is asking you to talk about the evolution of different types of, let's say, aspects of how they've evolved and, how they're being used today by businesses. So what you have to do is basically pick up some of these as bullet points and then write 20 to 30 words about it, summarizing in terms of, what is the importance of it and where you see the humble beginnings of that happening. Now, the last one in that is the evolution of digital technology. So when we talk about technology, as I mentioned to you earlier, applying practical or scientific knowledge to be able to create a service or solution which helps you in bringing productivity, efficiency within the business or the organization. So when we talk about digital technology, we are talking about technology which are helping us improve efficiency, productivity, communication across the business. And when we see that evolution happening, that evolution has started probably from the 1960s. We see what we've accomplished in the 70s, when you had ATMs and some of the home appliances becoming available. 80s was the televisions, 90s was the internet, 2000 was basically the starting of .com companies, social media, and then what we get to see anything beyond 2010 is primarily lots of e-commerce, m-commerce businesses appearing. So the evolution of it has been happening over the years, over decades, and what we get to see in today's time in 2021 is things like, we talk about artificial intelligence, 3D printing, talk about, 5G, for example, and that is what all is digital technology. This particular diagram or a picture also gives you a very good snapshot of how things have evolved since the 1990s and beyond 2020. So you see technology and digital evolution impacting entertainment. So we were all watching and consuming TV through Sky and maybe free view channels and things like that in developed world. But when you look at the developing world, in some cases it's the usual antenna that you see in the houses, and that normally is satellite communication or channels coming in. But if you see how that has transformed entertainment, you have Netflix, Hulu, you have now lots of the digital streaming services like Disney, which have come in, and they are becoming now a replacement to how we consume television and media or, information or news from television. That has also gone across to YouTube, and that has become a channel to broadcast. And obviously, a lot of companies today send and release and, disseminate information using different forms of these channels. So you would basically see that the evolution of digital technology is fueling transformation across businesses. It is increasing the uptake of technology to improve communication and reaching out to consumers. And most companies have some sort of digital strategy today in order to be developing a viable business. And that is where the concept of, when we talked about the Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0 and 5.0 are the bits that I wanted to basically highlight, which were essentially a part and parcel of, the digital evolution. Now, there's a very good video, very short one, which basically is very pertinent to us because when we talk about, let's say, COVID-19 pandemic, we basically see that all of us have, embraced digital technology because people are working from home. You could no longer go to the office because of the lockdowns and things like that. So let's listen into this minute and a half video, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to relate to this particular task that we've been discussing, how has the evolution happened. And we see this happening in our practical life. So you'll be able to correlate to it when I play this video. So let's listen in.
Most organizations would have had a plan to get true digitalization underway in a 3 to 5 year time period. But now that obviously COVID is with us, that's sort of sped that up exponentially. But I think quantifying what that transformation journey looks like, I think for a lot of people is difficult. We tend to think of it as, I'm going to transform a paper-based HR process or a contract signing or a contract award into the digital. We're all going to go out, purchase a car, purchase a kitchen, fill out the finance agreement and digitally sign it remotely or in person in the showroom. But from a business perspective, what is it that they're transforming? Remote access to the workplace is the next one that I would kind of naturally go to from a digitization perspective. You're no longer able to go to the office. Organizations were moving more heavily towards hot desking, remote working, downscaling the size of their offices. So that's not so much I'm taking a paper-based process and digitizing, I'm virtualizing my workspace. So moving in-house applications off of tin hosted by my organization, putting those into SaaS providers, moving to a cloud provider for a particular business application. Whilst it's an electronic process moving outside, it's still part of a digitization or digital initiative in my view.
So as you can see that, this video is quite particular because it talks us through in terms of what companies actually went through during the COVID-19 pandemic. And when we talk about the evolution of digital transformation, which is the last bit that we need to talk about in this, it puts it into a bit of perspective. So what is virtualization? Remote offices, taking some of the processes online, offline to paper-based to online is virtualization. But when we talk about digital transformation, basically, if these things are going to continue in the long run and office space is going to be reduced or things which are related to, flexibility through remote working, hot desking and things like that being introduced, that is what is going to symbolize what is called digital transformation. That means there are bits and pieces in the business, in the processes which are changing and changing for good, and they are being changed by adopting innovative technologies which could help in making the organization run faster, make it more efficient, trim down on the expenses on one side, and that is what is digital transformation. So when we talk about this evolution of digital transformation, what we are basically looking at is there are industries which are now coming up. For example, when you look at Amazon, the amount of home delivery that we are doing or buying online is increased to such a level that you see some of the stores like ATHE, Tesco, Morrison's, they are downscaling because they don't see people now coming into the stores that often. We are still doing our grocery and other bits of shopping, but the digital transformation has been that a lot of these companies have invested heavily into their websites. You look at the Tesco, Morrison's, Asda's, and Sainsbury's. They now do delivery of even grocery to your home. So you can go onto the website, look at buying and adding those products to your shopping basket, pay for it, and then pick up a time slot, and then that comes and gets delivered to your home. So you're no longer even going out because of buying groceries. You're willing to pay that bit of extra delivery charge, £1.50 or something like that, and that allows the groceries even to be delivered to your home. So this is talking about transformation. So you see businesses like Amazon, eBay increasing and you see John Lewis, which is announced, maybe a month or 2 months back, that they're going to be closing, I don't know, good 50, 60 stores across the UK, and they're going to be transforming or basically entering into real estate, wherein they will create, real estate properties which will be given out as high-end rental properties in order to diversify that business. Now, why is that happening? Because people are going less and less to the stores, they're buying more online, and that is a transformation that we are getting to see in consumer buying habits. And that is where companies are now embracing more of internet-related technologies, and that is, the evolution of digital transformation. So you see points that I'm going to use in the slide, things like the emergence of World Wide Web. We talk about the mobile revolution. We talk about Internet of Things. We talk about drone technology, VR and AR, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. For gaming, for example, this is becoming a very go-to field. So lots of games today, that you can play by, wearing or getting into augmented or virtual reality, is becoming something, possible. You look at a lot of key tourist destinations have now been transformed with augmented reality by Google, and you can wear a HoloLens and obviously go and experience the Piazza or see the pyramid or go into La Louvre and see that, digitally using an application rather than visit that place, and that is augmented reality. You look at 3D printing. So all these are technologies which are looking at digital transformation. Now, if you talk about digital transformation for a workplace, what is happening in the workplaces is travel is reducing steadily over the years. In the last decade, if you see, business travel is reducing because of the availability of internet, better connectivity, and video conferencing equipment becoming affordable. Polycoms and the likes of Join Me. You look at WebEx. You look at Microsoft Teams, Skype. All these are softwares which basically make video conferencing possible. So it looks like as if you're sitting in front of the person, you're able to have a face-to-face chat using video and audio, and meeting becomes, possible, wherein you can get more attendees, different people joining from different places across the office, across the countries, and it all is possible because of this collaborative working and softwares which are now coming up. So the evolution is, in terms of transformation that we see that is happening, is businesses are looking at saving costs and investing money into, digital equipment or equipment for video conferencing, and that allows them to connect offices or, have meetings or, get-togethers and things like that, working on projects, collaboration increasing, and that is all about screen sharing, video calling, face-to-face communication happening through some of the software and the transformation which is happening in the workplace. So these are self-explanatory slides, and I'm pretty sure that some of us can relate to this is because of the fact that when we use Join Me as one of the softwares to deliver lessons, what we are doing is essentially using screen sharing software, video calling software, because it's voice enabled. You're able to see my screen. I can fully interact with the screen, and scribble things on the screen, and you're able to see. You can take a screen print of the session that I'm doing. If you have certain slides that you want to look at, I can underline, I can show things, and all this is collaborative working. This is all possible because of the technology, the digital technology, the softwares which are now available, which I've listed a few here. There are lots of them, and that allows us to look at the transformation. So learning from a classroom-based to an online-based system is happening primarily using digital transformation, and that is what actually needs to be covered, for this task. Now let's very briefly look at expanding some of the things that we've learned into the merit criteria, which talks about the benefits of technology and how it has helped a range of industries. So here what we have to do is talk about the benefits, advantages and disadvantages of how technology is being used by business in different sectors, because it talks about a range of industries. So we'll have to look at least two when I talk about a range. So you talk about education and healthcare, you talk about education and defense, for example, the use of drones being done by the American military in say, for example, in various engagements in various countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places. So in any industry that you pick out, what we are going to be looking at is benefits of how technology is helping, the company in better communication, faster, for example, turnaround times in terms of customer service, providing a better customer service experience. Now, one of the examples that I would give you is when you go on to Amazon, and all of us have used Amazon. If you have to do a bit of a return, all you do is go on to the Amazon client, and when you are on the Amazon client, what you can do is basically see how the technology is actually helping. So let me try and see if I can log into my Amazon account and show you a bit of a quick demo in terms of how, for example, if you have to return a particular item, how simple that is to return, by just doing a few clicks. So if I go on to say my orders, just looking at, just say for example, pretty much looking at the orders, and if I have to do something in terms of returns, or if I need to talk to somebody which is like an Amazon assistant using, for example, the artificial intelligence, what will it allow me to do is basically look at, picking out some defined questions which will allow me to, use less clicks and essentially, return a few items or things which I don't want to, or I'm not happy with. And all that is possible using, technology. So I might not even need to call the customer services, because the AI side of the engine, which is built in as the Amazon assistant, will allow me to essentially review my orders, review my things that I need to do, and then obviously allow me to return something or, purchase something pretty much instantly with a few clicks online. Now, that is what we need to talk about here. So we need to explain some of the benefits. What are the benefits I've listed down, and what are the disadvantages to a certain extent? And you're putting out a lot of information on the internet. The major risk for us as workers, as for example, from a business point of view, workplace point of view, is that as technology becomes more and more invasive, what we are going to see is that it is going to eat into or take away some of the jobs which people do. For example, when you look at car manufacturing industry, what has happened over the years is the welding side, the painting side, a lot of these processes have become automated. So it has been taken over by robots, or a deployment of technology using robotics has made obviously some part of this processing, finishing, and assembly of cars quicker. But what it has done in the long run is basically taken away jobs or put jobs at increased risks because it is being automated. That means robotics or automation is being used primarily to make those jobs more efficient. So here there are lots of changes which are benefits of technology, which can affect a range of industries. And what I've done is I've used a few here as to explain. So what I would suggest is when you do this particular ask, what you have to do is pick up two industries, and that would allow you to explain the benefits that you get to see of usage of technology in various sectors. Now, in the slides, I put in the use of technology. How is it benefiting administration? How does it benefit communication, recruitment? If you look at in the older days, it used to be the HR companies or consultants that we used to interact with, but nowadays you can post a job on Indeed, LinkedIn, job boards, CV jobs, lots of these sites which allow you to electronically post jobs. And what it does is it basically shortcuts the process of recruitment. And that is one of the benefits that you can also talk about, is that how technology is affecting the HR and recruitment side of industry, wherein the availability of comparison sites, for example, when you go and buy insurance or look at mortgages, or you look at buying various things, you do go across to comparison sites, and usage of technology allows you to compare goods and services, which in a way does away with the middleman or the middle person, and that makes things easier because you're able to do it from the comforts of your home. Second, you're able to do away with the middleman. Third, you're able to effectively do it at a time that you want. It is available 24/7. And last but not the least, it also helps you realize some of the benefits because of automation. Things are a few clicks away, and that allows you to, even when it comes to decision making, decide those things, and obviously, order them, or, pick up the phone and speak, and whatever the transaction is, close it. Now, I have also looked at m-commerce in e-commerce, so mobile commerce, which is when you use Apple Pay or Google Pay, essentially, and buy products online through your phone. And when it is e-commerce, which is basically through the websites. So when you basically look at purchasing things on Amazon, or when you're on a website, when you go to JD Sports, for example, and you like something and you buy a pair of jogging bottoms or a pair of joggers and things like that, you're paying through the credit card, and that is the advantages of using m-commerce. So electronic commerce or e-commerce, m-commerce, what are the benefits of that? And I've explained both benefits and, the benefits or advantages and disadvantages. So across a range of industries, because it says a range of industries, what I have to do is basically choose a few. So that's what I've done is using these slides, talked about m-commerce, e-commerce, talked about, for a workplace, like a services business, what are the advantages? Now, in the last one, what we are basically doing in the distinction criteria primarily is to talk about the importance of planning for adapting and adopting digital technologies within the organization. Now, that is something that we need to discuss, and that basically means that what you have to do is talk about here what are the first, summarize what are the emerging technologies that we are going to see in the future, which are going to come. So things like cloud-based computing, you talk about 3D printing, you talk about, artificial intelligence, robotics. Remember the first slide that we had, and that basically, gives us the, let's say the upcoming trends in digital technology. Now, using that particular slide that we discussed, this one in particular, when we talk about some of the emerging technologies which we are going to see in the future, what we have to do in the distinction criteria task is primarily look at a bit of analysis. So here you have to talk about, picking up, let's say, a few, sectors. If I put it this way, like for example, you have to pick out a sector or so, and within that, what you have to do is basically do a bit of analysis by separating some of these, and talking about maybe whatever technology you pick out in a bit more detail. So how they're related, how they're going to be contributing to, the let's say the business in terms of improving efficiency, productivity, or sustainability. So we need to talk about that in a bit more detail, and that would help us cover, the analysis part of it. So, for example, here, a company is looking at moving some of its IT infrastructure to cloud. That means they're moving their servers, their mails, and other bits of it to cloud sites. That means they're going to be outsourcing it, and they're going to move those services to a cloud-based provider. And how would that be helpful for the business? Now, that is where the analysis has to be done. So how will that be helpful to them? We have to basically look at taking an example that the company would look at either taking Amazon Web Services or subscribe to Microsoft Azure, Salesforce, Google Cloud, whatever it is. And then using those services, what they will need to do is basically train their staff internally. And once the training has been done and they've adopted that technology, what are the benefits it will bring to that business? That means it will do away with, say, some sort of IT costs, infrastructure costs that they have, which are ongoing costs throughout the year for the next couple of years, which will bring in a bit of savings. It will also mean that the data and accessibility side of things will become easier. It will also mean that some of the costs that they incur every 3, 4, 5 years because of IT becoming redundant would go away, and that would be actually pushed out to the vendor, which is basically providing them that space on their servers in the cloud. And in effect, that would help the business, save money, or in this case also to a certain extent look at, meet their own sustainability and environment-friendly goals, because they're using less of hardware and more of, devices to be able to connect, which means less going to landfill and things like that. So those are kind of benefits of emerging technologies. If I talk that in a bit more, broad sense by giving an example. Now, there are going to be other advantages which you can also pick out in terms of why businesses need to plan, for example, for some of the emerging technologies which are coming, things like, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about, blockchain as a technology which is coming up, primarily when we talk about Bitcoin and things like that, which is going to become an alternative method of, maybe at some stage banking in the future. And that would help you understand, the future emerging trends which the businesses need to be careful about in order to make sure that they are going to benefit from it in the future. So some of these that we talk about, are summarized here in bullet points. So when we talk about integration of applications, customer relationship management, you talk about webinar applications, applications, content management systems, why businesses are adapting telephony. Like, in the UK, all telephony will become VoIP-based or internet-based by 2025. So we'll no longer have landlines. All of the numbers that we have will all be connected through the VoIP or the internet. And that is one of the things which businesses need to be ready or, should be planning to look at, because if that is how is it going to affect them? How is it going to be that they will need to transform some of their applications and outreach that they do in terms of sales and marketing to consumers, customers worldwide or within a particular geography? They will need to start planning now. And that is where the analysis and the importance of planning for the future emerging technologies for a business becomes important. So with this, what we will be doing is basically stopping here, and that would help us comprehensively cover the learning outcome 1. There are some additional reads which I would suggest predominantly on the website, on the BBC website. There are some good articles which will be relating to, the merit and the distinction task and help you understand that in a bit more detail. So my suggestion would be to look at doing a bit more reading on this side, which will allow you to, get more information with regards to the higher assessment criteria task. Now, if I go on to Moodle, just very briefly to show you, I have already uploaded a few articles that I think are relevant to the learning outcome 1 in merit and in the distinction criteria. These are good articles for you to read in terms of understanding how digital evolution is helping, productivity growth happening within, the companies. So it's a good research report review which has been published. It's a good read. That's one. And the second one would be a CIPD paper, which is a summary, the executive summary and a detailed report where I put both of them, which basically talks about the impact of artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation technologies on work. And this is directly related to the task 1D1, which is the distinction criteria. And if you read some of these pages in the article, the summary part of it, it will help you understand a perspective of how it is going to impact business, specifically in this case, talking about human resources as a. So at this stage, what I would do is obviously invite questions. If you have any doubt, queries, happy to take any questions on today's session, and then we'll be looking at covering and going on our journey for LO2 on Tuesday. The usual times, and obviously we'll get some of these sessions revised so that you have the new timings for these. So thanks for joining, and I'll invite some questions now.